Testing.
All right, thank you.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out on the shortest day of the year and 4 days from Christmas. I know it's a busy time for you all, but this is our fourth and final meeting in this series, so it's good that we have the committed core back. And I'd like to welcome all of you once again, and welcome all the people that are viewing via the stream online. And so without further ado, I turn it over to our Maestro.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, welcome to you and to everybody watching. Welcome to all of you this evening as we come here for this last session, as we have been reading and reflecting on Laudato Si. Let's begin by praying together. Again, our opening prayer on page 158, a prayer for the earth. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. We pray through Christ our Lord, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Just as a comment, I was reading this chapters 5 and 6 and going over them and then looking at the questions, but also I had gone back to one of the other chapters, and there was something I just wrote out that I thought we need to just really keep in mind about all this, that I think is in a kind of centers a lot of why this is so important. But it's in the section on human ecology, and the Holy Father says the principle of the common good is the unifying principle of all social ethics. So the common good is the sum of those conditions of social life which allow social groups and their individual members relatively thorough and ready access to their own fulfillment. The basis of the common good is respect for the human person with basic and inalienable rights ordered to his or her integral development, along with the principle of subsidiarity and solidarity and preferential option for the poor, for the vulnerable. And that's just so important when you think about that and why it's so important. This is so important in taking care of our earth and changing so many things. And as we look at it and what's happening, it's for the common good. It's just we need to keep in mind. And when so many people are, who are not understanding of it or whatever, but it's for the good of all humanity. The earth, even our own little piece of land, is not just ours. The earth is creation, it's God's, it's for all humanity, for all human beings. The earth itself, all the animals, all the diverse systems of life, and this creation of God, but the need to take care of it is because of the principle of the common good and the unifying principle of all social ethics of how we treat one another, and it shows the respect. If we take care of the earth, it shows the respect for the human person, because all of us, all human beings, have a right to basic life and to that which sustains them, to food and water and clean air and work, and then to live, a healthy, fruitful life in their lives and with their families. So that's such an important principle to keep in mind, and I think they're thinking of the people, corporations, to think of the impact that they have, and the Holy Father is just trying to get to look at the impact that they have on the earth itself, on the environment, and on the lives of human beings. So it's just so important. One little aside on that is just kind of a week ago Friday, a guy from the cathedral who has a devotion to Father Capon, the priest who was killed in the prisoner of war camp in 1951. He and I left early Friday morning and went to Pilsen, Kansas, and I have cousins in Marion, and we had breakfast, and then to Pilsen, to the church and the museum and all of that of Father Capon. Then we went from there to Wichita and to the cathedral to his tomb. And then we visited one of his relatives, and then came back. So it was about a 400-mile round trip that day. But when we were coming back, we got off the turnpike, and coming through the Flint Hills is so gorgeous on the turnpike. And I grew up just north of the cattle pens. If we could go straight across that section of the Flint Hills, we would come to basically where a lot of my family on the west, on that east edge of the Flint Hills. And if I could get off at the turnpike there and cut across, I would know where to go. But it's so beautiful. But then when we were in Emporia, we stopped in Emporia for supper, and I said, let's go to Brahms. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Brahms ice cream store. Well, when I was a kid, the Brahm family had their dairy north of town on the Admire Road, and you could go out and they had the big dairy, and then they had the Peter Pan ice cream stores. And I actually worked in a Peter Pan ice cream store when I was a junior in high school all summer long. And then they moved their headquarters, I think, into Oklahoma, but they moved, but they have all these Brahm stores. They don't only do ice cream, but they have kind of a little restaurant and do hamburgers, and then they have a lot of their products for sale, and meat products and dairy and that. But the person I was with made a comment, and we were talking about, it's one of my favorite ice cream stores, but it's not here in the area. And I've heard people say, wonder why they don't have that. The Brahm family has this, they probably really could have, if they franchised out, they probably really could have made something, but they wanted more to emphasize their family, and they respect the families of their workers. And so where they put a store is where their headquarters are in northern Oklahoma. They have a thing that their truckers who deliver products, they want them to be able to go and drive to the place, deliver the product, and be home that night to be home with their families. They don't want them to have to stay away from their families for days or several days or nights. And it isn't just the saving of the money, but that they made a decision that they would just go with a certain radius from there out in a circle around that. And unfortunately, Olathe or Overland Park is a little bit too far north. It's outside of that radius. And I think they'd be very popular, but they made a decision. That family, they're doing well financially. They didn't need to franchise it and, end up someday saying we have 3,000 stores and all of that. But also for the welfare of their workers. They made those decisions, which is really amazing. And I think, Pope Francis would be happy with that kind of, and I realize the thing of big corporations, but, there's still a human aspect to that, of how they're doing that. Anyway. And then, and he said, so also too, well, going then to our questions, Pope Francis says that well, first of all, in chapter 5, Pope Francis answers the question of what we can and must do to heal our broken world. He stresses that analyses are not enough. Rather, we need proposals for dialogue and action, which would involve each of us individually, no less than international policy. Pope Francis says that to solve the issues facing us today, we must think of ourselves as one world with a common plan. Do you believe that that is possible? What would have to change to have this happen? So do you believe it's possible to have, think of ourselves as one world, with all of these issues facing us as one world with a common plan? Do you think that's possible? No?
Not in today's world.
Not in today's world?
How about that woman that wanted the Christmas song?
I don't think we can do it in today's world. We're too split. There's too many political differences, too many political pull this way, pull that way. And we're just not we're not even a united nation. Trying to unite the world would be even more difficult. We have to have a common need to come up with a common plan.
Other responses to that? Get real close.
I'm not sure what I'm thinking, but it seems like we are at a place where we're becoming more consciously aware of what's happening. I mean, of course, internet and all of that makes us that much more aware, but I think to me, in the contemplative world, I'm speaking more as a person who is involved in contemplative prayer, and that type of prayer, I think, expands us in our thinking to look at things not as divided, but as unified. And there is a oneness with all creation.
Keep your microphone up here.
All creation, all life. And I know today, I'm in a prayer group with, it's interfaith, but we listened to Richard Rohr's, his latest Conspire series, and we heard a woman today who's Native American. And I mean, it was just like a conscious, an awareness of dialogue with people who are different, people whose lives, if we understand where they've come from, what they're about, and what their needs are. I mean, I think if we're open, rather than saying, I have the answer. But she talked about sustainability is a worldwide common need right now. Everybody is talking about sustainability, how we can sustain what we can do as far as sustainability. And her comment was, why don't we ask the indigenous people who have known sustainability for thousands of years? So I mean, they have a lot that they can give us in a sense of how to live sustainably, in cooperation with Mother Earth. Because that's what they've done for thousands of years. So I'm thinking that there's more of an awareness happening now.
So there seems to be a growing awareness, though.
Yes.
Yeah, there are these issues, but there is a growing awareness of the needs and around the world and a lot of cultures and peoples. Okay.
Okay, do we see an example before us today for the last almost 2 years.
An example of what?
An example of COVID-19 and vaccinations or not, you know? You can't even draw the country together to protect themselves and their friends and neighbors around them. We had a 53-year-old nephew that died a week ago Friday in Denver from COVID. He didn't see it coming. You can't hear it coming. It's sad, man. But that's the way it is. Those that don't want to are not going. You can't convince them, and that's, you know, if the Pope can get this straightened out, you know, in the whole world, that would be terrific. We can all pull for it, or 80% of us can pull for it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always that 10% or so.
I also think that it's difficult sometimes to know which path you're on. I'm going to use Senator Manchin, who is the only Democrat who wants to vote no on the Build Back Better bill, and he thought he was supporting the coal miners. But the coal miners informed him today that he's not. He's not supporting them at all. They know coal mines are going by the wayside, and the Build Back Better plan had money in it to build factories and other things in the coal mining areas to give
For
these
clean energy. There's a huge
Right.
thing in there on clean energy.
But they were going to employ the people who used to work in the coal mines. And all at once, they were going to have something going on in their community. They wouldn't have to leave. They were going to be able to build these manufacturing plants or whatever that they could work at. And he thought he was supporting the coal miners, and they said, no, you're not. So, you know, it's
That was
hard to
on the
know.
news today. I haven't heard that.
Well, it's so hard to know what path you need to follow.
Mm-hmm.
I have a comment
Okay.
in response to that question about, is a international plan, is that feasible, is that practical, is that realistic to expect? I think there's always hope, and I think there was a lot of hope coming out of the Glasgow conference, just the fact that all those nations met together, and the United States met this time, the last time we were absent from it, and that, I think, hurt us as a country, and I think that hurt the international community. But the fact that we're back at that conference and participating, and, you know, there were some agreements made. I don't know, I mean, a great number of nations participated. I don't know if every nation participated, but I think...
Are you talking about the Scotland conference?
Yeah, the Glasgow conference, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know, I think that, you know, it's kind of like in the United States, the international community, they can come up with general agreements on reduction of carbon, things like that, but the details of the plan at a, you know, country level has to be worked out within the country. I don't think you can come up with the same, you know, we have to leave it to the individual countries to execute the plan and hopefully abide by it.
Well, and to work together, but I think there is a developing consciousness, and, you know, the Scotland conference may not have achieved what a lot of people hoped for, but it was certainly better than nothing, and it brought a lot of countries together, and again, that's creating new consciousness and a deeper consciousness of what needs to be done and how to work together. So it still is a positive event. You know, it's a positive event because we have to keep doing these things, you know.
So if we think about the world as a family, and you're sitting around the breakfast table, and you're talking about all the problems and things that are going on, at some point there's a list, and you get started. And Mama says, you go here, and you do this, and you go build some fence, and we'll make the beds and get the laundry done, and I'll make bread. And pretty soon, everybody's doing something, and oh my gosh, we've done a lot today. And it's the same thing. I think we have to get started. and then interest builds. When people see results.
I think
And
that's happening.
There are going to be people that are never going to get on board. They're going to sit around and say, the sky is falling. Let's get out of town. Whatever. But
On the rocket to Mars.
there you go. And I think we can challenge some of those people to redirect some of their pursuits, but not until we get some grassroots going in. That's why I think we need to start with some actions here in our parish and create interest. And then
One of the things I think that when we look at this or the plan, or as we're doing all this, and it's like, why is it difficult today? I do think there's a consciousness and a lot's happening. There is a lot happening in a lot of places. But the Holy Father mentions a number of things. Why is it difficult, for people to do this today? And he lists a number of things: ethical and cultural decline. A lot of people just, ethically don't look to the good, the social good, the principle of the common good. That goes to your statement about the COVID issue. If you look for the principle of the common good, that should, if a person thinks of that, that is a moral issue because it harms other human beings. You give this disease to others, and it isn't just about you. And so the inability to have that kind of ethical sense of that, to make that decision, I heard in today, again, the spike is happening in hospitals now again. And I think it was today or yesterday, they said on the news, the KU Med Center, I think 80% of the beds that have COVID people 80% of those people were not vaccinated. And you just go, it's, and then he mentions rampant individualism. He says a self-centered culture of instant gratification. We're dealing with that a lot, a self-centered culture.
Oh, hi, Father.
Annie.
Yes, Kelly, who's joining us online, says, it seems there's not a lack of knowledge as how to solve problems such as hunger, etc., but just the plan to carry out the logistics and the desire to do so.
The will. And one of the things that needed is a conversion, a conversion experience. But the Holy Father mentions too, a lot of things today. There are many people self-centered, just instant gratification. For many, an inability to think about future generations. A lot just can't or won't think about that there may have great-great-grandchildren. Or how will it affect them? Or will they be able to have great-great-grandchildren? Always this need for a growing economy. We hear that constantly on the TV. A growing economy, that's how we, whatever percentage, that like controls everything. But we have to think, he says, of ourselves as one world, and then how are we going to, to look at these issues. But there is that more and more, I think there is the growing consciousness. What are some of the plans, what are some of the common plans that Pope Francis encourages the world to embrace?
I was just going to say, just before you start that next question, it looks like when you were talking about things that are, individualism, probably greed, I think the Glasgow conference was not attainable, what they wanted to attain, mainly because there were oil, coal, people there who were profiting from their, wanting to pay people so that they will not go into sustainable business. And the same way with, I think, Joe Manchin. I think he's being paid by his own, he's making money out of this, I think. So I think it's individualism. He owns stock in the coal mines. So I mean, so it's individualism and greed that is preventing some of these things from really for the common good. I think it's that individualism that the common good is not.
But the thing I think about that too is with the coal, how many men have died of black lung disease? If you develop clean energy and get them to working in clean energy things, you're going to save a lot of lives.
But when one person, though, is thinking only about that one person,
Okay, right.
that person can affect everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a lot to get through. What are some of the common plans? I mean, the Holy Father lists a number of things that we can do to achieve the goal, of, this clean earth, but things that we have to, and there are a lot of these things in some ways are being done, but we have to really work at. And you remember some of the things he has a whole list of things that he mentions, like protecting biodiversity. We have to we need to protect all life, biodiversity. Eliminate poverty, and that's something in our own midst, in our own communities. How do we do that? Just wages, there are a lot of things we have to look at. He says promote social development, and then reduce carbon emissions, reduce greenhouse gases, develop clean energy, wind, solar, recycle, change mindsets, reduce the arms race. He talks about that. And that's something that reduce the arms race. And us and China, the Soviet Union, were some of the biggest producers of arms, just like all these social problems, drugs are a real problem that come in from the South, but Mexico, they have a big issue, and they're saying, but the guns that the cartels use all come from the United States. But the reduction of arms. And he says to stimulate creativity, and that's something to really keep going. And the development of energy cooperatives, and then continued dialogue on environmental impact. So those are some things he mentions. Although Pope Francis says the richer nations carry a great deal of accountability for environmental issues, why are rich and poor nations alike responsible for, how are they alike responsible for caring for the environment? Are they both of them, rich and poor, are both responsible for caring for the environment, and so how are they alike? In what ways are they alike? I was trying to think of that and going back to what he wrote, but I think that thing one, whether we're poor or rich, a lot of times, and maybe the poor have less, but constant consumption, just to consume things, is we're alike in that ways. Maybe the rich consume more. That's not necessary. A lot of it's not necessary, but consumption, but the responsibility is having to, there's still the responsibility of caring for the other. I guess that would be one way we're really alike. Rich and poor, both, we need to care for one another and then use energy and the abilities coming from the different directions.
Father Harry, I think along those lines, both rich and small and poor countries, they have their moneyed classes. We have the corporations or businesses that are willing to exploit the environment for a quick profit. good quarter. I've learned in the business world that increasingly
Get a little closer.
results were aimed at the quarterly results. And if you had poor quarterly results, then you might have to do a new plan and things like that. And so that quarterly pressure to produce good results is actually, I think, something that would probably cause a lot of the plans don't have it's hard to execute a plan in a quarter. And there's this pressure to have a plan in the corporate world. But when you're tied to the quarterly results, and when they're bad, you abandon the plan.
I'm not hearing the word, what, quarterly?
Quarterly results. So each
I'm
quarter,
not understanding that.
each quarter, the results come out. And it wasn't that way when I started in the insurance business, but the last company I
You're
was
talking
with-
about, so, okay, I'm not connecting there, okay.
And so, that has impact on how the stock does on Wall Street and how, what the investors think. And so that's part of it too, is that we have to be patient. If we develop a plan, we have to stick with it. And there's a lack of patience. And then and both small and large, or poor and wealthy countries, I think, are subject to that same dynamic, as well as the greed factor, and rich, greedy people want to, make more money and develop more land, and sometimes, ignoring things like the need for biodiversity and, caring for the environment in such a way that promotes human life and other types of life.
Okay.
I think one thing that I took away was looking at how we disassociate elder, wise, the wisdom, the keepers of the culture, the wisdom, versus the young and the youthful focus that our culture has. And the earth doesn't work that way. We know in the Midwest we have to be patient. There's always a change of seasons. We learn when we garden that we have to wait for the seed to germinate and grow, and we have to tend the garden, and we don't get to reap the harvest, and maybe the earth, maybe bad weather comes, and every 7 years we make a profit, if we're farming. But there is a patience that we have, and I just think we're so rich here in the Midwest because we have a lot of those values from those of us that have come from rural background. And there is not much difference in generations here in this area as opposed to major, huge metropolitan areas where there's such a huge influx of people coming and going, and they're not tied to the land so much.
Mm-hmm.
But we here in the Midwest, if we dig back 1 or 2 generations, we can usually within our families find somebody that's of the land or an extended family member whose family has worked the land and has those values. And that, I think, is where we can access some of the wisdom we need, as well as native, or indigenous cultures. When we think of the people that settled Kansas, we're here in Overland Park, right here in Overland Park, maybe not so many of us are gardening, but we probably have relatives that could teach us a lot about that.
I agree with you completely, but how do we access that a lot, Yeah. I think some of us, when it comes to indigenous cultures, read a lot, but, we don't have any kind of...
But if we pair youth with wisdom teachers, like within our parish, we have youth and we have a lot of older, wiser people.
Mm-hmm.
And
I do agree. I think there is a real people who grew up in the rural areas, farm areas. There's a greater sense of interdependence, of really needing each other and how it all supports and all that. And also, too, that whole sense of trust and patience, because you can't control wind or rain and sunshine and the crops and what you do and all the different things. Any other comments? Pope Francis reminds us, quote, environmental protection cannot be assured solely on the basis of financial calculations of cost and benefits. What is your reaction to this statement? How does it challenge both the politics of the right and of the left? It's not just a matter of a bottom line of cost and benefits, but what's your reaction? How does this challenge both the politics of the left and the right?
Actually, Father, I was going to comment on something before you started that question, but it might include this one. I'm not sure. But you talked about the arms race earlier, and how we talked about this Build Back Better plan has struggled in order to be able to pass. And it includes the environment, it includes the poor, it includes everything that the Pope is talking about, whereas there was a defense bill that passed without any problem at all, which was billions of dollars. And I mean, we didn't even hear about that. But it just, you know, they will pass a defense bill for billions of dollars, spend that on an arms race, whereas we can't even get agreement on how to take care of our, I mean, it's just, you can see the difference in values of what we're about somehow. And I think that you said right there something about both left and right need to look at something that is, what was it you were just saying in that last question about the Pope was asking us to?
How does it challenge both the politics of the right and the left?
So we're all challenged.
I mean, the environmental protection, you can't just look at it from the point of view of financial calculations of cost and benefits. But if you're protecting the environment and all of the different programs and different things, you know, what I guess in a sense, what sacrifices, what conversions do you need to make on either side to really do that? That's what I was, when I was thinking about it, what I wrote down is like, you know, from the right, that the economy is not just about making money, and you know, our capitalism is a way of certainly using gifts and creating, and it's done amazing things. But on the other hand, you know, oftentimes people, you know, like they pay the right, they have to be challenged that the people need just wages to be able to live, not just minimum wage, not just the basis. They need health care, they need a living wage. Those have to, and you could say that could challenge some of the, on the right, as the way they look at, it's just the making of the money. I mean, that's a, you know, I can't think of the right word, but then on the left, I think sometimes I see on the left, you know, many of the people are, they're really into the environment and all these kind of stuff, but so many of them, you know, approve of abortion right up to the moment of birth, and they don't see the value and the dignity of human life. And many who support, you know, saving all, you know, the biodiversity, and which is important, but on the other hand, don't seem to value life in the womb and life, human life to that extent. You know, so there are challenges, and both of those are generalizations in a sense, but still, there are things on both sides that need to be challenged ethically. And I think that's what he was getting at. The Pope asks us to begin, here's a good one, redefining our notion of progress. The Pope asks us to begin redefining our notion of progress. In light of what has been written in light of what has been written in Laudato Si, how might your definition change, or what does progress mean to you? So the Pope says we need to redefine our notion of progress. So what?
Okay, I was just going to, I'll give it to Janet in a second, but I was just going to say, for me, progress is awareness, becoming aware, educating myself, understanding what the problem is before, I mean, to me, that's progress.
Okay.
Being ignorant, being denying that there's a problem, that to me is no progress, you know. But if I can educate, if I can become aware, and if I can be open to the situation, if I can be open and find that it's something that challenges me in my own life, and trying to incorporate that in my own family,
Okay.
you know, within that situation, to me, that's progress.
A deeper awareness, a deeper consciousness
Yes.
of all the issues.
Yes, that's,
Okay.
for me, that's progress.
I used to wonder, you know, the world is a big place. And we do things here that might affect ecological things that might make the planet better. But then you have 1 billion people in China, and you have, I don't know how many people in India, and all of these people are contributing to the problem of global warming. And I used to wonder how we were ever going to get everyone to think about this. But then I found out that India, of all places, has a plan all of their very own, and I think that's what you were alluding to. When you said each country is going to have to come up with their own plan. India has these tricycle rickshaws. They're powered by lawnmower engines. And if you ever have heard...
That are powered by what?
A lawnmower engine. It's loud. Lawnmower.
Oh.
You know, like you cut the grass. They use lawnmower engines to power these rickshaws. They're loud, and they have no exhaust system on them at all. So India has come up with a plan. They're putting electric motors on them.
Mm-hmm.
A few at a time, well, a few being, you know, we're going to do 1,000 today and 1,000 tomorrow. But you have to have
the infrastructure.
Infrastructure, thank you, to sustain those electric motors. Now they will run for 18 hours, so they can bring them in and plug them in and come back to work the next morning, and their little conveyance is ready to go. And they haul people around in these things.
They
2
do.
people at a time. They're just like, I don't know, golf cart taxis is what they are, but very noisy. So India's coming up with their plan, and to solve a problem. That's not their only problem, but I think we can solve one problem, maybe several people working on different problems, but solve problems one at a time, and maybe at least make a dent.
Mm-hmm. I have been in India and seen all those. Mm-hmm.
I'm just picking out some quotes, some little one-liners in here that lead me to think about how we measure progress in a global way would be unity is greater than conflict, and patience, self-discipline, generosity, realities are greater than ideas. Like, look at what's happening instead of just spewing out ideas. What is the earth teaching us? What does it mean?
Closer.
What can we do? What is the earth telling us? If Mother Earth is our mother, and there's a margin of life and sustaining life and creation, not just human life, but all life, the whole world, the whole universe. And what is it teaching us? We've gone beyond the limits. We've taken too much. We need to slow down and give back. We need to look at it. I think that would be success.
Progress.
I was thinking too, some of the redefining our notion of progress, that maybe sustainability is a sign of progress rather than just overconsumption. If people begin to realize, and simple, I think sometimes people think that, well, everybody becoming poor, so I mean, that's not what it is. A simple life is different than poverty. I mean, but we can live simpler. I think all of us here could probably look in our homes and all things, and there could probably a lot of things we could do without. Or how we manage things. I think too, if recovering some of the things, something that I've thought of too is, we live in a culture where it's a consuming culture and things are made to wear out. Where it used to be, a refrigerator was made in 1940 and it would last till 1985. I mean, things, when I was at the cathedral, the dryer finally, or the washing machine finally gave out, and I had the secretary look up, and the thing was like 48 years old, and it washed a lot in all of those years. And I thought, well, it's time that it needed to rest. But the thing is, making products that last a long time, but the whole idea of sustainability, of beginning to get that, what is it that we really, really need? And progress, where profit is not the sole criterion of progress, but quality of life. Or a question too is, how does something promote the common good? How is something promoting the common good? Well, let's look at, let's finish these questions here, and because we're getting close to, oh my. On chapter 6, Pope Francis, well, first of all, he says, the final chapter calls us to a new lifestyle, calls each of us to a new lifestyle, to look at our lifestyles. Pope Francis stresses that education and training are key to real transformation. Quote, change is impossible without motivation and a process of education. Unquote. All educational sectors are involved primarily at school, in families, in the media, in catechesis, and elsewhere. Finally, we are each called to reflect seriously on how we are living in communion, not only with God, with others, and with ourselves, but also with all creatures and with nature as a whole. Pope Francis speaks about compulsive consumerism. What does this phrase mean to you? What is the relationship between consumerism and selfishness, between self-centeredness and greed, between emptiness and consumption? So compulsive consumerism, is that a reality in our world?
Education. I was with my grandchildren this weekend, and my grandson and his wife, new wife, brought me home. And they said, "What are you doing this week, Grandma?" And so I said, "Well, tonight I'm coming to this program studying the Pope's encyclical Laudato Si." And they both graduated from St. Thomas Aquinas. They're both practicing Catholics. They were married in the church this summer. And they said, "We've never heard of that." And I thought, oh, what? I mean, I know that. I know most people haven't. The majority of people have never heard of Laudato Si. Why don't we? I mean, these kids should be getting this in high school. They're the ones whose lives are going to be affected. Why don't they study the encyclicals in school? Why aren't we studying these in our parishes? I mean, the Pope is teaching us, and nobody knows about it. Education.
Well, we are doing it, but
we are doing
we
it.
are
Yes.
doing it, but
You are doing
how
it,
many
but-
people come? You know, I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
and
how
it was
many
promoted,
parishes are doing
and it was promoted at masses with young people. But I know what you're saying. Yes,
Parishes
yes.
are not doing it. Most parishes are not.
That's true, and that's very sad. It's in our diocese, it's not been something really promoted yet.
Do we know why?
No.
Well, in the public schools, they're working on ecology. Shawnee Mission School District built that big administrative center over on 71st Street. Anybody been behind it? There's a great big garden out there, big enough they need a tractor. And they have an irrigation system where they're using water coming off the roof of the building. And they're teaching classes on how to grow things that they're going to use, not just in a meal, but they actually take that food and prepare it in the kitchen and serve it in the bistro. So it's fresh it's coming from the garden into the building and being prepared and sold as food for the program. So I agree with Patty. I don't understand why we aren't doing this throughout every school. I think it needs to be maybe brought up from the pulpit during Mass, not during Mass, but you know what I mean, when they make announcements and that sort of thing, rather than maybe if we got enough people knowing about these programs, they would show up to not. I think, they're going to talk about that book, not realizing that this is a way of life that we need to learn how to do.
I don't know. People have to open up to listen. On things too. See, from the other side, I would say a lot of things are mentioned. I mean, and what I have over the years found frustrating is a lot of times as a priest, we promote parish missions and all kind of things, and on the extra things outside of Mass, so few people come. So it's so easy to say, it's the priest's fault or that we're not doing enough, but we priests sometimes say, the people aren't responding enough. But at any rate, but too, you just wonder how people, what they're hearing. The first night we had this, we had over 30 people, then it dropped by half. Did they think those, I wonder why they didn't come back. Is it that didn't want to read, but I went through basically outlined it all and thought, well, is that enough? Or have questions and that doesn't, or they don't agree with it, or the Holy Father. I don't know. I don't know what the reasons are. Oh, okay.
Well,
But at any rate, going on, let's go on with what the Pope says. So compulsive consumerism, but and also too, the second question, why is the family the first place where environmental concerns must be taught and lived? Well, that's where all the attitudes basically are formed in families. I mean, and so parents have to make decisions to recycle and do things and teach their kids too. Things have to be done. And maybe you, as grandparents, have a greater impact on that today than even maybe the parents do, and on teaching these things. See what, and here it gets to a point. What does Pope Francis mean when he says that we must undergo an ecological conversion? In what way should our encounter with Jesus Christ become evident in our relationship with the world around us? Well, I think that's the real issue, a conversion. And you're talking about a deeper awareness, a deeper consciousness that we have to, and what the Pope is saying, that we have to undergo an ecological conversion, beginning to think, to listen, to maybe it will take people being confronted with water shortages or these things, but there has to be a conversion to begin to really respond. And on the part of so many people. A lot of people are there and really acting, but a lot aren't. And unfortunately, and we all know this, that oftentimes people won't do something proactively, will only do it when it gets to a critical issue. And then, you know, I was thinking too, like for the common good, and are we capable of that today in our culture with the individualism and all of that? And what I mean is we just look at how the U.S. responded in the past at times in the 50s to polio and that, and getting vaccinated. There wasn't any big issues about it. People did it, you know, the sense they saw. How all pulled together in World War II. You know, today we hear all of this, people talking about it's my right not to get the shot or this kind of thing. But I remember my parents told me they were farmers. None of my dad, none of my uncles or my dad, none of them were drafted. They all had deferments because they were farmers down at Opie, Kansas, and none of them were drafted. They were all told they needed to stay and farm. And so in my family on my dad's side, we don't have any veterans. It's just kind of, it's unusual. We don't have that. But they all had a farm. And they would tell us, you know, how my dad would say how they had all these rules, and these people would come out and say, on all the years that the war was going on, they had a certain amount of land, an acre or a half acre, that they could use for their own, to grow vegetables, to can vegetables and that kind of thing. But then Dad would tell me that one year they'd come and say, we really need corn for whatever it is the corn was needed. So this year, of your 120 acres you're gonna have 80 acres of corn and 20 acres of Milo, and would tell him that's what he was gonna do this year. And all of the uncles, they would be told, you know, how many acres of soybeans or wheat, and then the next year it may change. And then what, you know, they could, and then of course the government bought it, and at whatever price they set. But, and I was wondering today, would that even be possible if we were in some kind of critical situation? Would some of the farmers say today, well, no, this is my right to farm, to plant whatever I want to plant, you know? I mean, given today's mentality, what we're seeing, we were talking about the COVID issue, would people do that, you know? You know, but they came together, people just sort of automatically was like, this is for the war effort, for the good. So we did it. Yeah, you know. And so that whole sense of the common good and the conversion that is needed.
Father Harry, I would say that there are examples, in the news of people being concerned for the common good. Mm-hmm. And one thing I'm thinking about is places like Houston and New Orleans that have been, slammed by hurricanes and terrible flooding.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And people get in boats and they go out and rescue people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh, there's a yes.
A natural disaster, people, come to the fore and help each other. Mm-hmm. So there is I think there's a good spirit out there, but I think it's only in a time of crisis. And, really what we want to aim at is to take measures to avoid a lot of crises. We're in climate change right now, but right now what we have to do is develop plans to soften the impact of climate change, to keep it from getting worse.
Mhm. And there's still a conversion process. There's still a lot of people, but part of the issue is still getting, you said right now we're in a climate crisis. There are still a lot of people who don't believe that and won't accept it.
Father, you were saying though that your family was told by the government. I think that's the problem today. People don't want to be told by the government.
Mhm.
They're anti-government. And so if the government tells us to do this, they're not they're not telling me what to do. I can do it myself. I'm mature. I know what to do. So I think that is what the mindset is more today than what your family was then. Then the government wasn't their enemy or something. Today, so many people feel that way.
Let's go to the very last question, and this is really important, and given who we are and what we're about, and as Catholics, as Christians, and being together, how are the sacraments and the Eucharist in particular concrete signs for us of God's love and care for His creation? Why does Pope Francis call the Eucharist a sign of cosmic love? Why does Pope Francis call the Eucharist a sign of cosmic love?
If we think of the cosmic Christ, the presence of the divine spark in all of creation, it's right there. And it's
So
pure
then when
gift.
we receive Holy Communion, we are a part of it all.
We are.
Okay.
It's an outward sign. It's also an outward sign to look at the moon and realize somebody was floating around the moon and saw the earth floating around, God's present in all of creation.
But in our spirituality, and by the way, in that last chapter toward the back of it is a beautiful reflection on Trinitarian life. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, life that selflessly gives itself to other and that is continuously creative, and that when, as Christians, we're caught up in the life of the Trinity, and the Trinity too, that whole Trinitarian love of of God, creation, and us, of God, all creation, and human beings, is in a continual flow and relationship. And if we begin to reflect on that, I think a lot of times people in receiving Holy Communion just somehow think me and Jesus, or however they look at Jesus, or this is just something special. But it's connecting me with the entire universe, with God Himself, and with all reality, and each other. Because, and I've said this in sermons, I don't know how, but if I receive communion and you receive communion, then we're one with each other. If the risen Lord is present to each of us, fully present, then we're present to one another, and we're in communion. And we don't just receive communion, we become communion because we're united with one another and then with all creation. It's to look, this is a whole, our spirituality, again, broaden our consciousness and our awareness that we are caught up in this absolutely incredible, in the very life of God. We're just caught up in the very life of God, who creates and gives life, and who loves creation and wants us as a part of it to also see that, too, as loving creation. And that's a way of loving one another. I was thinking too, I think that, the sacraments, all of this, it connects us to all of reality. All of reality. I was just thinking too of, another part in the very beginning. He had reflecting on some scriptures, but kind of bringing this all together. It would say, what is the scriptural What is the scriptural basis for all of this? Well, it's Matthew 25. Jesus saying, whatever you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, you do to me. And he is the cosmic Christ, but bringing all of creation together, but whatever you do to my brothers and sisters, whatever you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, you do to me. So St. Francis referred to always brothers and sisters as all of creation, of all of created reality, but also to just as whatever we do to the least of our brothers and sisters, again, the common good, we take care of the earth in order to care for the least of the brothers and sisters. It should be something we do to preserve all this for the welfare of all human life. The welfare of all life, but all human life. Because that shows our love for the least of the brothers and sisters. And see, we have to take that, I think a lot of times, as we look even as a nation in relationship to poor nations or whatever, or corporations and how other countries are treated or this kind of thing, but where we bring our faith to it, whatever we do to the least of our brothers and sisters, we do to Christ, is in what the Holy Father is saying. That expands our consciousness, where we're not just thinking of being nice to the neighbor. Whatever you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, you do to me. Well, just being nice to that person or that person, we need to really broaden that and expand our whole consciousness of what that means. And many of you do that already. I mean, a lot do in how we respond to needs and that kind of thing, but especially in taking care of the earth. So
I guess.
But I just thought of something too. You were saying this is a process ongoing, I think even the beginning in the early 20th century, when Teddy Roosevelt and the people began making the national parks, there was a deepening awareness of the protection of the environment and of creation. I mean, so this isn't just something brand new. Like, it has been happening. There are a lot of things that have been happening. There are a lot of people working, over the year, farming techniques to do things better. I remember my dad being taught things at the Lyon County, they had, what was the name of the office they had that helped farmers on farming methods and techniques. But it was a lot of it had to do with protecting the earth, not wearing it out, but all of this. Again, this isn't something for brand new, but it's a developing consciousness because it's now picking up speed, if you will. Well, it's 8:15, and a few things. Patty sent to him this 4 ways your parish can fight climate change on a budget. And did you send that out to everybody here whose emails you have?
Yes, over 60 people.
Okay.
Over 60 people.
Over 60 people?
Over 60 people, probably close to 70.
I'm sorry, I still didn't get that.
Over 60, but it's approaching 70.
Okay,
it's
excellent.
In the 60s, yes.
I just read it kind of quickly because I didn't get it to about 4:30 or something that I saw it. And this is, I don't know if you read it yet, but take some time. This is a good thing. 4 ways your parish can fight climate change on a budget. So if they all get copies of that, and then to begin to reflect. So where do we go from here? Where do you go from here?
I think we have to. I think we talked at the last meeting about getting together and starting to do a parish plan sometime after the holidays. or at least the beginnings of one. That we would present, you mentioned at the very first session that we develop a parish plan for caring, things that we can do, and kind of along the lines of this article, and then presenting that to parish council.
And I would say that that's not something you want to put off too long, or that you would want to because you need to do some of these things, or something, especially, I don't know what the timeline, well, I guess you still have to raise another $1 million for this building or something, so, some time there to, if that would impact it. But, so I mentioned too about setting a time. Do you want to set a time sometime in January and get together? Now, with the streaming people, to be a part of that, I think it'd be kind of, I don't know, it's kind of difficult in here. That would, if you sit around a table or whatever, or if you can get the sheets of paper, or there's a thing downstairs you can write on. But that's kind of more up to you. This is your parish. And so beginning to brainstorm of reflecting on, and not every little issue discussing it, till, you wear out, but just listening and things, and that can be seen later as to incorporate it into a plan, or what is possible to do and within a certain budget.
Does Tuesday nights work?
She said, does Tuesday nights work?
Okay, does Tuesday night work for you?
Well, we could just continue this on, this discussion. I mean, next Tuesday, we're approaching New Year's, but Christmas is over, so that might be a time for us.
We need to skip the holidays.
Oh, yes.
Just skip the entire holiday.
And if you have 60 people you're sending this out to on emails, maybe send that out. And you sent that out, maybe send out another questionnaire. Begin to write down for them, so to be a part. Maybe then we're going to have, when you figure out a time to come back to talk about it, but to make a list of things or possibilities, and to dream, that's another thing. There's, the synodal process that the Holy Father is implementing right now. Just today, I got the list of all the questions that the Holy Father has sent out to all the bishops of the world, to send to all the priests and all the parishes of the world, to gather people together to reflect on those questions.
Well, maybe we could get together the first Tuesday in January, but that's right after the New Year's, but that's after the holidays.
January 4th. What did you say?
I think that's too early.
Okay.
We need to have a little break and then get finished with the holidays and
18th. We reconvene, and in the meantime, we could be thinking about ideas. And I could send an email out to everybody. Just telling people, propose 3 things we think we should do to take better care of creation, and send it out to that same email list. 3 to 5 things, or just whatever ideas they have. It's like a survey, send questions out, but one of them would be, what steps do you suggest we need to take as a parish to take better care of creation?
Or what can we do?
I think this little 4-page article gives a lot of ideas of what some
And
parishes are already
sometimes
doing.
people need, you know, what I think would be good to get back together is sometimes people need to hear others that sparks things, you know, oh yeah, that or that, you know. Like you can get him over here. He could teach people how to do gardens, right?
Yes, I can teach people quite a bit about that.
You could, let's see, what plot of ground around here could you change into a garden that grows for people or to help feed at the food kitchen? You know, I mean,
At one time, we wanted to have a community garden, but we don't have a space to do it, but we put on those trees. That's the only space we could find for a community garden.
was where?
The trees that were planted, what they call the giving tree.
The Giving Grove.
The giving grove.
Okay.
Let me,
I don't know that.
I have some, so we worked with a outfit called the Giving Grove that does this for other churches, and we planted an orchard up behind the school. And so I've met with, I forget the guy's name, but I talked with him over the phone, Matt Bunch, I think that's his name. He's a horticulturist. The Giving Grove has 2 horticulturists that'll, you know, help you develop a plan for your orchard and community garden, and they'll come out and assess it and give you tips and provide you equipment that you can use on a, you know, they lend it to you. So they're really a wonderful organization. So one thing that this Matt Bunch did was he developed a map of where the apple trees were, where the pear trees were, the cherry bushes. There's some type of nut, I forget what it's called, nut bush that we have. No, it's not pecans. But anyways, so the community garden was included, and it was included in the south parking lot, that green space, way at the south end of it. And it was done because Father Bill had a community garden in Topeka, and he thought that was a great idea, and so Matt put that in there kind of as a, you know, because Father Bill expressed what a great thing that was for their parish. And
So is it there or not?
No, it never got developed.
yeah,
Well, see, now, this is part of the example I'm talking about, though. You mentioned something, and then it starts to get into all the details and things. When you get to this meeting, you can't do that. You'll be there forever, or you'll have all kinds of meetings. You have to make more of a statement about we'll explore, or how do we do this, or how to go about it. Not getting into all the little details, because what I found, people will do that and then they get just discouraged and nothing happens. And already, see, it started to turn into that. Well, then we have this and this now, and now we can't, you know. And I just made a suggestion about, and not necessarily having a garden here, but having you teach people how to do gardens, you know, in terms of self-sustaining gardens. But the thing is, that's a thing that, okay, then you do the next one. You don't beat something to death on each one, each thing you talk about, you know. So it is like, you know, how do you recycle in the parish? You know, to recycle. Looking at, and I think it's on one of those sheets, of like everybody bringing a mug and then having those available. Downstairs, you have the big dishwashing equipment. Do you need to throw away things all the time? You know, getting back to the use of doing dishes, or, you know, not using plastic. I mean, some concrete things of organizing youth events. You know, every Saturday morning as a part of the Boy Scout thing, or to walk around and clean the property. I don't know. Those are things to do. I mean, all of these different things to think about that help build community as well. Yes.
This was just kind of a small starter thing, but our Queen's Ladies had a luncheon on Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
and we were prepared to have 100 people. And we had previously bought real plates several years ago just for smaller groups, and we decided to buy more plates from our treasury, and so we now have Corel dishes that are lightweight and not real breakable. And we used all real dishes for the luncheon on Saturday. And we were supposed to have a lady bring her children, her teenage children, to come and wash the dishes in the dishwasher. And at the last minute, she couldn't come. And several of our men in the parish came forth and did all the dishes after our luncheon, and were able to help put them away.
Wonderful.
So that's
See,
just
there you go.
That's just a start.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How many ladies were there? You said you prepared for 100?
We could have, that was our limit, was 100, and there were probably about 75 maybe.
Okay. See, those are the kind of things to write and to do, and then to say, now how do we do it? What's the action plan for doing it? And then you do it. And then publicize things too. I think that's really an important thing to do.
That's
You know,
what I was
as-
gonna say, is we
you know,
need to count those as outcomes, that it's doable, and that feeds on itself. Then somebody else says, oh, well, we could do this, you know,
Mhm.
or when we have the men's group on Saturday, or when we have the flower sale every spring, we could include native plants that encourage bees and birds and that kind of thing.
All of the weeds and herbs.
Bees and birds. Herbs.
Doesn't the Green Team is a ministry. There's a board, sorry. The Green Team's a ministry. There's a board back in the information station. Does the Green Team have a slot in that board? There's a place where you can put what's going on in your organization.
TV screen?
No, it's an actual information. Yeah, you can put brochures or whatever you want in there. They're free to, people can pick them up. I think we maybe could start putting the idea of the month on paper. Did you know you can do this? You can recycle this, or how to do this, and maybe put it in there, and then people can just pick it up and at least get the Green Team publicity. But it's back there in the information desk. I do too. Are you ready to go?
I need to stand. But see, that's something that the ladies then to talk about more, just to make a plan, you know, like one, we're going to try to eliminate waste, try to not use, throw away stuff, have reusable things to save energy, not to produce more plastic, and then here are the things we're going to do. And then that to be put in the bulletin. The ladies, the Queen's ladies are doing this, and they talked about this, and this is what they're doing. That's a way too of getting consciousness in the people. Of people read the bulletin. Oh, you know, I mean, just those things to help build and create ideas and that kind of thing, you know. So, but that's so important. So are you going to make the proposal for Tuesday, January 18th?
Yes, I'll call tomorrow. call tomorrow. I'll call Kathy Marr and get us on the calendar for that date here, if we can do it, or downstairs, whatever's. We'll get on the
But we're
calendar.
going to need, you're going to need some planning on that, on paper, on, are people bringing something to write on, or bringing things, or having a whiteboard up here, or something like that?
There's a new member of the Green Team, Rebecca Corpage, who went to school at Queen of the Holy Rosary before it was John Paul, and she does organizational. She does organizational study seminars. She leads organizations in doing things, and so she carries around a whiteboard board in her car. She says, one of those pads, and jots down ideas, like that. So we can make use of her skills.
So are you saying you're going to contact her to ask her if she'll do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, she wanted to join a ministry, and she didn't find any ministry that really interested her. And then the newsletter that the parish puts out had that article about us as the new coordinators, and she said, this is something I'm interested in doing. She's interested.
Excellent.
And
Then
so
she's a professional facilitator.
That's what it is, yes.
Then let her run this.
Yeah.
Tell her what to do and get basic questions, or like that page, the 4 things, and let her develop questions, let her facilitate, let her do that. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we going to have a prayer and then I'll
Yes.
close?
We will pray together on pages 159 and 60. We'll offer this prayer, a Christian prayer in union with creation. And so together, Father, we praise you with all your creatures. They came forth from your all-powerful hand. They are yours, filled with your presence and your tender love. Praise be to you. Son of God, Jesus, through you all things were made. You were formed in the womb of Mary, our mother. You became part of this earth, and you gazed upon this world with human eyes. Today you are alive in every creature in your risen glory. Praise be to you. Holy Spirit, by your light you guide this world towards the Father's love and accompany creation as it groans in travail. You also dwell in our hearts, and you inspire us to do what is good. Praise be to you. Triune Lord, wondrous community of infinite love, teach us to contemplate you in the beauty of the universe, for all things speak of you. Awaken our praise and thankfulness for every being that you have made. Give us the grace to feel profoundly joined to everything that is. God of love, show us our place in this world as channels of your love for all the creatures of this earth, for not one of them is forgotten in your sight. Enlighten those who possess power and money, that they may avoid the sin of indifference, that they may love the common good, advance the weak, and care for this world in which we live. The poor in the earth are crying out, O Lord, seize us with your power and light. Help us to protect all life, to prepare for a better future, for the coming of your kingdom of justice, peace, love, and beauty. Praise be to you. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, thank you all. It has been a pleasure. Thanks to all of you who are watching at home. Thanks, Annie, for your weeks of helping.
Have a wonderful Christmas.
Thank you, and a good Christmas to all of you.
Thank you so much, Father Eric.
Yes, I would thank you very much. And we're going to miss these Tuesday night sessions. I almost think it should be a weekly thing to come up and just talk about things. But you did a wonderful job, and you were very patient with us and gave us some good guidance. So thank you again. And I'll be back in touch with all of you and everybody that's following the stream and that's on the email list